Welcome back. Usually, when I do the 30-second season preview, it's just the standard, same as every other preview. This is not. The numbers on the board are the same. The way that I've set this up is the same, but this is not going to be the same as other season previews. My guess is this will probably be much longer, um, because there's a certain gravitas to the situation with the Columbus Blue Jackets that defies the normal season preview. Here's the numbers, here's how players have performed, here's how they're doing now, or at the very least the most recent season, and here's the depth chart, and hey, how do you think they're going to do? It's completely different. What Columbus is going through right now is it's a situation where tragedy seems to be a part of Columbus's identity at this point. We went through Kiv Lennox last. How long ago was that? It wasn't that long ago. And now Johnny Gaudreau, right? The entire hockey world going through this mourning process. And training camp opens in 12 days. Time marches on. And so for general manager Don Waddell, who in taking over this team already faced a bit of a daunting task. This is a team that has struggled finding an identity. Looking at Columbus over their history, they haven't really had an identity. And now they're facing a situation where if they bottom out this year and they win, say, 5 games, nobody's going to bat an eye. There's absolutely zero pressure because I can't recall in my entire time watching hockey a loss of a superstar of this stature during an offseason. The closest I can come is thinking of Pelle Lindbergh during the season for the Philadelphia Flyers. And the Flyers rallied around it. Bob Froese put in some tremendous performances in net for Philadelphia that year. And, the Flyers did end up with a pretty good record. In the event that Columbus is able to rally around this, and if Columbus can end up in a playoff position this coming April, there's going to be a lot of people rooting for Columbus. And I'm included. And they could be, if there was a chance, if the playoffs were decided a completely different manner, and you could have an Eastern team and a Western team against each other, and it was the Vancouver Canucks against Columbus, I'd be rooting for Columbus based on what's happened with this franchise and the amount of heartache that the fans have gone through recently. I think this is a team where everybody is kind of secretly rooting for them, just not so secretly right now. So I'm going to go through the numbers as I have with other teams because they're on the board, and I feel like that team still seems to be standard, needs to be standard, but it's definitely going to be different. So Boone Jenner's been their leading scorer over the last 10 years, and this is cumulative, of course. 643 games, 176 goals, 159 assists, 335 points. As their captain, this is a huge year for him. And there are going to be a lot of guys looking to him for that leadership. And, I believe he can do the job. Cam Atkinson, 486 games, 176 goals, 154 assists, 330 points. Zach Werenski, 486 games, 90 goals, 212 assists, 302 points. Nick Foligno, 484 games, 188 goals, 118 goals, 158 assists, 276 points. Oliver Bjorkstrand, 382 games, 111 goals, 123 assists, 234 points. Seth Jones, 381 games, 50 goals, 173 assists, 223 points. This number stumps me a bit because it looks wrong, but it's right. Alex Wenberg, 415 games. He only had 40 goals in Columbus, 161 assists, 201 points. He had a couple of seasons where he really could not get the puck in the net. Artemi Panarin, 160 games, 55 goals, 114 assists, 169 points. Pierre-Luc Dubois, 239 games, 66 goals, 93 assists, 159 points. And Brandon Dubinsky qualifies for the top 10, 325 games, 54 goals, 101 assists, 155 points. In net, again, over the last 10 years, Bobrovsky, their leader in wins, a record of 160, 99, and 16. Jonas Korpisalo, 87, 78, and 24. Elvis Merzlikins, 68, 79, and 30. Curtis McElhinney, 16, 22, and 7. And Daniil Tarasov, the future in net for them, really, 12, 24, and 4, unless it's Jet Greaves. So looking over the last 5 years, and it's been a tough slog for Columbus, right? 26th in points percentage at 450. Goals for per game, they're 28th at 2.74. Goals against, 3.47, which is 30th. Power play, 16.9%, that's 29th. The penalty kill, 77.8%, that's 24th. This past season, the numbers aren't any better. 29th in the league at a 402 points percentage, so almost below 400. Goals for per game, 2.85, that was 25th. Their goals against, 3.63, that's 31st in the NHL last season. Their power play, a woeful 15.1% at 31st, and 26th on the penalty kill with 76.3%. So any number you're looking at with Columbus, not where you want it to be. And looking at their scoring from this past season, Johnny Hockey was their leading scorer. 81 games, 12 goals, 48 assists, 60 points. And the idea of getting Johnny going is why you add Sean Monahan. And I'll talk about him when we get to the depth chart, because the depth chart is really kind of anyone's guess at this point. Zach Werenski was second in scoring on the team, 70 games, 11 goals, 46 assists, 57 points. Kirill Marchenko, 78 games, 23 goals, 19 assists, 42 points. Boone Jenner, 58 games, 22 goals, 13 assists, 35 points. Dmitry Voronkov, 75 games, 18 goals, 16 assists, 34 points. Cole Sillinger, 77 games, 13 goals, 19 assists, 32 points. Ivan Provorov, 82 games, 5 goals, 27 assists, 32 points. Alexander Texier, 78 games, 12 goals, 18 assists, 30 points. Yegor Chinikov, 53 games, 16 goals, 13 assists, 29 points. And Damon Severson, 67 games, 9 goals, 19 assists, 28 points in his first year with the Blue Jackets. In net, and what would turn out to be the first of maybe many seasons with Columbus for Severson, right? Top two goaltenders, Merzlikins, 13, 17, and 8, 897 save percentage, 1 shutout. Tarasov was 8, 11, and 3, 908 save percentage, no shutouts for Tarasov. Now for rookie watch, I went with Gavin Brindley up front. I went with Denton Matejchuk on the blue line. We'll see who ends up making it. Now, when we get into the depth chart, this is where things are murky because, and I'll cheat a bit here and go over to the cap hit first. Their cap space is currently $25,698,334. Obviously, the salary cap hit for Goudreau that they would have had this year goes by the wayside. They have a ton of cap space in a league where teams need cap space, right? So they're in a position to add. And I don't think that the lineup that they currently project to have will likely be the one that they have starting the regular season, but you just never know. Now, I don't have Caden Lindstrom on the list because he's still dealing with injuries. They're nursing him along. Odds are he's probably going to play in the WHL this year. And just to make sure he's 100%, he's healthy. And then you bring him up next season. Again, with current events being as current events are, there is no rush to bring along your potential future power forward who could be that number 2 center, right? And that's really the plan. You have to look at the long term with Lindstrom. So when we look at their depth chart up front, these lines to me could potentially be interchangeable. And when you look at that first line, it could be almost anybody. I think Adam Fantilli, I think you put him on the wing. Boone Jenner in the middle. Justin Danforth, I think, veteran player, can play on the wing. And then you'd have James Malatesta, Sean Monahan, Kent Johnson. Malatesta's a good young forward, so's Kent Johnson. Putting them both with Sean Monahan, I think, could work. I don't think there's a right or wrong answer right now. We haven't gone into training camp. Obviously, everything's going to be in a blender. The one line that I think you leave together, and maybe it's a third line, maybe it's a second line, Kirill Marchenko, Dmitry Voronkov, Yegor Chinikov. They had very good chemistry this past season. A season where, again, not much went right for Columbus. That line at times looked pretty good, and there's a lot of potential there. Now, maybe that ends up being the third line. Maybe it ends up being the second line, and maybe it doesn't matter very much. Maybe Dean Evison, who, again, I think very good coach, decides to roll the lines relatively equally in terms of ice time. I think we as fans sometimes overblow things a bit in terms of who's on the first or second line, but maybe they'll do offense by committee. That could be an option here. And then on that fourth line, you'd have likely Sean Corrali, Cole Sillinger, and Matthew Olivier. And again, that's just my idea of where the lines are going to end up. Obviously, at this point in time, finding a current projection of what the lines could look like in Columbus, people are still processing everything. So it's really still up in the air. And in 12 days when training camp opens, Dean Evison will look at what he has and decide who suits which position and which line, right? And maybe it breaks up the Russian line. Maybe it does that. Maybe Marchenko, as a really good goal scorer, has good chemistry with Monahan in training camp, right? So I don't think there's a wrong answer. And then when you're looking at the extras, Michael Putia. Putia, I think, is a good player. You don't pronounce his name the way that it looks, which is one of those things. Dylan Gambrell, veteran forward in the NHL, of course. Trey Fix-Wolansky, one of the best NASCAR names of a National Hockey League player. Gavin Brindley and Owen Sillinger. And again, Gavin Brindley as one that I think, if he gets into a spot in this lineup, could be fascinating to see how he does as a rookie. But there's some good depth here. And again, if you consider with the fact they have $25,698,334 in cap space, according to Puckpedia, there's the possibility that Don Waddell is able to add somebody. And it could be substantial. And it could be a big contract. I don't know how many players with contracts, say, exceeding $7 million in cap hit, would necessarily be on the block, but there might be a contract that a GM wants to get out of. It's not a great time of year for it. To be honest, if you're trying to pick up like a big money contract, the best times to do that would be right before the trade deadline or right before free agency, when teams are looking to create cap space. But there's that possibility. There's always that possibility, right? Now on the blue line, Zach Werenski, underrated defenseman at this point probably, Ivan Provorov, Damon Severson, Eric Goodbranson, David Jiricek, and Jordan Harris, who was, of course, picked up in the Patrick Laine deal. And I don't think that if knowing what was to come, I don't think that necessarily would have meant Waddell would have said, well, we'll try to talk Laine into staying. I don't think if he had a crystal ball, he would have done that. I think that bridge was burned. I think that was done. I think it was best for the Blue Jackets and for Laine that relationship be severed, and he's moved on to Montreal. And I think Jordan Harris is a decent NHL level defenseman. And Montreal is awash in those. They have a lot of good young defensemen. Harris was, from a Montreal perspective, an expendable piece, which Columbus needed. Now, in terms of the extras, Jack Johnson returns to Columbus. Jake Christensen, Denton Matejcik, who I think you keep in Cleveland playing for the Monsters until there's an injury up here. And then you can bring him up and he can play. Stanislav Svozil also would be in that category. Samuel Nazco and Corson Kuhlmans also. So there's some good young defensemen here, and there's some potential here for Columbus, right? In net, the question marks are there. Elvis Merzlikins. Sounded like he wanted out. Sounded like the team was ready to move him. Waddell basically confirming there's no real interest, no real desire by other teams to pick up the Elvis contract. So at least for this season, Elvis staying in Columbus. And Elvis can be a good goaltender. Part of the frustration I've had watching him the last couple of years is I'm not sure what happened. But he had like a couple of very good seasons. That's how he got that contract. And then it just he hasn't stayed at that level. So whether it's injury, whether it's that NHL teams figured out a weakness in his game, whatever it is, he's got to turn that around. The best thing that Elvis can do if he wants to get a trade from Columbus, and I don't know how this cloud that's going to hang over this team, how that's going to affect whether somebody wants to stay in Columbus or not want to stay in Columbus, especially in as in Elvis's case, he has already stated that he'd wanted out before this incident happened. I don't know I don't know where Elvis's mindset would be right now. But if he wants out, having a really good start to the season improves his stock and makes it more likely that he can get traded. And if you're Columbus, you want him to get off to that good start because I think Columbus would be comfortable with Tarasov as the starter. His numbers were better than Elvis's this past season. He looked good down the stretch too, I thought, anyways. And Jet Greaves kind of sort of looks ready too. So in the event that you trade Merzlikins, you may not need to get a goaltender back, or you may be able to trade down. By which I mean maybe you trade out Elvis, and a team's like, well, we've got so many goaltenders already under contract, and maybe Columbus takes back somebody that they can put at the AHL level, and they bring Greaves up, that kind of thing, right? So I've mentioned the cap space. One thing that works in Columbus's favor, if they play this right, 6 of 9 games in October are at home. They start the season on the road. They have 2 games on the road to start the season, which is perfect. Considering the emotional state of things, considering how tough that home opener is going to be, no matter what, you could cancel this season for Columbus, have that home opener in a year. It's still going to be a pretty emotional moment. But the home opener is about a month away. But having those games on the road, being able to get comfortable, get your lines rolling, play hockey, you're still going to be seeing a lot of fan support on the road for Columbus because, again, fans, I think, will be quite understanding and quite caring for this team. And I think this will be different than any other season when it comes to Columbus. And when you try to think about it, how often do you see a road team getting support from the other team's fans? It's not that often, but I do think Columbus will have that this season. 7 of 13 in November are on the road. So if they get that good home record, if they can, use those home games to rally and get themselves going, they may be able to keep that going through November. Getting to February, where there's the Four Nations tournament, they have 2 away, 2 at home, then the Four Nations tournament, 2 at home and 1 away. It's not a terrible schedule there. And when we get to April, which is where you're getting ready for the playoffs, they have 6 out of 9 games at home. Don Waddell said this summer that losing has kind of been accepted in Columbus. And it sounds like he wants to change the culture here. I am sure that he still does. I think that his losing will not be accepted. Very likely tempered right now. Given what's happened, very tempered at this point in time. And I don't expect that we'll see any changes based on losing behind the bench or necessarily on the ice. I think it'll be all about if he feels like he can improve the team, he'll make a move. Otherwise, you let it ride, right? Now, the Stanley Cup odds are showing at plus 40,000. Absolutely understandable. This is a team that was at the bottom of the East, 402 points percentage. And at this point in time, they don't look like a team that's going to win a Stanley Cup. This is a team that wants to build themselves up, become relevant in terms of a Stanley Cup conversation. And I've talked about this with Columbus before, that they've been a team that at times I have forgotten about when I've done like 32 team videos. When I've talked about every team in the league and I've been like, oh, I forgot to mention Columbus. It's not a dislike thing. It's always been just sort of, they've never really truly been a contender. They don't have, like, their logo is fine. I've seen people cut down the logo on their look. I'm fine with it, but does it really stand out? No, not really. This year could very well be different. And this year could be the start of building towards something. And so for me, it's a matter of, are they going to rally around what's happened? Are they going to take this and use this so that in the long term they're going to be a better team, better franchise? I think they can. I hope they do. I legitimately hope they do. I hope that Columbus has a fantastic season. I would love to see them win the division, come out of nowhere. Elvis has a great year. I'm all for it. I'm on that bandwagon. I have no problem at all with that. I'll get a Columbus Blue Jackets flag and just throw it right up. I'll take my name down the whole bit. If they make the playoffs, they win the division, it'll be Columbus stuff in the background of videos. I would be quite happy with that because this fan base has been through it. This organization has been through it. And at some point in time it has to turn around, right? So, looking at the channel vote and understanding that at this point in time that channel vote was weeks ago. It was before the Johnny Hockey incident. It was before we lost the best player on the Blue Jackets. And then the vote was 2% for first or second, 2% for third or fourth in the division. 12% said fifth or sixth, and 83% said seventh or eighth. At the time, 9.3K votes put in. So basically, I have not refreshed that polling in at least a week. And I did not want to refresh that polling now either. Pretty sure the 9.3K votes, probably not that far off from where they are, because in general, the people that are going to vote will vote pretty early, and then the ones that don't just don't go back and look for it. But it is an interesting season for Columbus because on the one hand, from a winning and losing perspective, the season doesn't seem important for Columbus all of a sudden. But from a perspective of what this franchise is going to look like going forward, how things are going to be run, and how they deal with this, navigate this, this could be a very, very important season for the franchise. So I wish Columbus all the best. I would love to see them in a Stanley Cup final. I'd love to see them win a Stanley Cup. I would love to see this be the final tragedy to befall this franchise for at least the next 50 years. I would love to be standing in front of this board 5 years from now and talking about how the passing of Johnny Gaudreau was this tragic moment for all fans everywhere in hockey. I don't even want to just say the National Hockey League. And that Columbus was able to pay the proper tribute, give it the proper respect, the gravitas it deserved, and came out of it a better organization. And that the team rallied. I would love to see no more players coming out and saying, we don't want to play in Columbus. And I think that's part of the reason why Don Waddell was hired. I think that in order to create this environment where players are going to say, you know what, I will invest my long-term future in Columbus, which Johnny did. Johnny did that. And Johnny did that at a time where players weren't doing that. He went against type. He was expected to sign in New Jersey, and he said, nope, he signed in Columbus. And so I have nothing but respect for that decision, in that it was one that went against type. When guys like Dubois were leaving, Panarin's leaving, Bobrovsky's leaving, and Johnny's going, I'll sign there. I'll sign there long term. I'll put my money where my mouth is, and I might even take less money from them than I might have got from New Jersey. I'll take less money from them than I would have got from Calgary because I want to play there. And so if going forward we see Columbus becoming an organization that players want to play for, and all of a sudden they're far more relevant in Stanley Cup conversations years down the road, we could have a good story here. Absolutely tragic in its beginning, and we're in that infancy, in that beginning now. But I will be fascinated to see how their season unfolds. And I didn't feel like there was going to be a time where I could do the season preview and I could do it the normal way, the easy way, that I could be, flippant with it. I didn't feel like there was going to be a day where suddenly, okay, now's the perfect day to do this. So I thought I'll do this now. It's Saturday. I'm feeling a little better than I have for the last few days here. And we're not really into the weeds yet of players coming into camp. And I don't want this video to get lost amongst training camp stuff. I don't want this video to get lost amongst talk of rookies coming in and what the rookies are doing in the rookie tournaments, which are starting this coming week. So I felt like now was probably as good a time as we were going to get, understanding that there wasn't going to be a good time to make this video. So thank you guys so much for all your support. It means a lot. And as tough a time as it is right now for Columbus fans, I want Columbus fans to know, and I'll say right this to the camera when I say this, and I know I don't look at the camera enough, comparatively speaking, with other YouTubers, but the hockey community is with you guys right now in a way that we really never have been. At least I can't think of a time the hockey community has been, and I'm like NHL fans, where we've been behind one team. And if there are people watching this going, well, I'm not behind him, then I'm overestimating the support. But for me, I want to see this franchise really turn things around. And I think they've got the right coach, the right general manager. And I think there's enough good pieces here and good young players on the way up. There's definitely some hope. And I want this to be the end of tragedy in Columbus. That's it. No more. Done. Done. Just I can't imagine it. I'm not going to go any further than that. Just you guys have been through it. So all the best to you if you're watching this. And again, I will say this, that if this incident is still in your brain and you need to talk to somebody about it, then pick up a phone and talk to somebody about it. And if you're too young to pick up a phone, then get on the internet, and any help that you need that. Don't let anybody tell you that you're weak, because why are you upset over a hockey player? That's stupid. You don't know him. You're weak. You're a moron. No, don't ever let anybody talk to you like that. You have every right to be just as connected and attached to the players you look up to as you want to be. And if this has upset you to your core, then you have every right to feel that way. So don't ever let anybody tell you that's a sign of weakness. I think it's a sign of strength that you're willing to admit that. Because the people I've known in my lifetime that say that you're weak for that are usually the ones that'll get like really, really angry over the silliest little things. So always take that with a grain of salt from some of those individuals. So take care. Thank you guys so much for watching this video. And again, this is as close to a season preview as I think I can do with Columbus. There's just so much that's still uncertain. And while they're below the cap floor, they can bring guys up from the minors. They can carry all 23 players. 23 is the limit. And still end up just above the floor. And Waddell may very well decide to do that. Maybe he won't make a change until just before the regular season starts. It's really up to him at this point. But when we've seen what he did in Carolina, so he's already shown that he can turn a franchise around. Now it's Columbus's turn. All the best to you. I will talk to you again soon.